I'm happy to see you, Floris and Michelle.
Hey, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Michelle has been my friend and Michael, my husband's friend, for a very long time. And I just met Floris recently. And I saw that you guys have some things in common. And the way I met Floris is that he has a really interesting Kickstarter campaign where he's creating a mobile app, Mymero, and has really neat perks, like his own medieval music and t-shirts and a chance for anybody to have their face as a character in the game.
Oh, very interesting.
And then Michelle, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what I know about Michelle. Michelle is an entrepreneur. I met him through telecommunications. We're both in that industry. And he was very helpful to me when I got started with DIDX.net. And since then, I've discovered his expertise in medieval culture and the music and there's probably a better word, but the jousting. And he's an expert green thumb, a great gardener.
I wouldn't go so far as to call me an expert at anything. I like to think I'm competent at more than, I'm at least competent in several things, but I wouldn't call me an expert.
You're just being modest. But is there anything else you guys would like to share about yourself so that when people watch this, then they'll get a better idea of who each of you guys are?
Okay, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. That's what it was for. So, I would be happy with any amount, basically. But this amount, I think it was probably roughly the costs of the pictures I used, the artwork, and less even, but
well, actually, I think I was probably one of the first people when I was living in Montreal in Canada. I think I was one of the first people at the Rogers store to sign up for the original iPhone when it came out. So mobile has been something for me that has been actually integral to running my business since the original iPhone came out. I used to have an absolute passionate hate for what I called the IT bat belt. In the late 1990s, of course, you carried a pager. You had a discrete pager. You had a discrete messaging device. You had a discrete camera. You had your cell phone. You had your PDA. And so depending on, it was getting ridiculous. If you worked in the IT industry, you'd have 6 or 7 things hanging off of your pockets and belts, and it was starting to look like I say, the IT bat belt. When you're trying to run a company, that's completely ridiculous. So for me, mobile applications, my iPhone right now, I've got everything I need literally to run my company. I can issue invoices. I can check the status of my servers. So for me, mobile applications are absolutely the way forward. And almost by definition, that means so is mobile gaming. I'm a gamer. And I keep a nice selection of different clicky games on my phone for those moments when I'm stuck somewhere but can't put the phone down because I'm either waiting for a call or I'm waiting for a message or whatever. So for me, I'm actually looking interested. I'll have to tell my son about your Kickstarter because he's a huge CCP fan. So for him, collectible card games are all kinds of cool.
Actually, I've been making music for much longer time than I've been doing programming. It started with playing the piano, and when I was young, I played that for about 8 years. But when I was in college, I wanted to do something creative, and well, I guess I was already interested in computers and wanted to make computer music. And that was around the year 2000, a bit earlier even. And around that time, you had pretty cool software, and you could do pretty much anything, as long as you had some good samples. And I was very experimental, so I tried all sorts of music. Often it would sound electronic, of course, so it would be trance music or ambient house music, well, techno, that sort of thing.
All my favorite genres so far. Keep going.
Trying anything, but for when I was making this game, I wanted to make different music. Or I already had some ambient music that would fit the game, but I was interested in these new software modules that would let you play with really nice medieval sounds and like the lute or the harp, and there was even some vocal packages. Like you could have Gregorian chants, which sounds really nice, and another software module called Chef and I. Well, that sounds really nice. It's a female voice, but she sings in kind of elf language, so that would fit the fantasy theme of my game really well. So I went on experimenting with those sounds, and that led to the first songs for my game, which you can listen on SoundCloud. And my artist name is called The Penultimate Truth. The Penultimate Truth, well, that's borrowed from a book title from Philip K. Dick. I love science fiction, and he's my favorite writer.
A good choice.
So, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's really good, and this was a really nice book, The Penultimate Truth. It's an interesting story about the future, where a lot of people are working in factories under the ground, and they're building robots, and they build them because the robots need to fight as soldiers in war, and people cannot go above the ground because there's been a nuclear holocaust. But the protagonist of the story still goes up and looks around and finds out the truth, which is that the robots aren't really used as soldiers, they're used as butlers, and there's a small elite of people living on top of, in the normal world, and there's the world is inhabitable, but there's just a fancy few people that live very comfortably, and a lot of people that work underground as slaves. So I thought this was a brilliant story. I should make a movie of that. But anyway, The Penultimate Truth, Philip K. Dick, but that's my artist name, and I put a couple of songs on SoundCloud, so you could check that out. I'll type in the.
Yeah, would you do that? That'd be great. And I know that Michelle is a steampunk fiction author, and I've bought and read 2 of his books. I love them. I never even heard of steampunk until he introduced me to his books, and I was really hooked, And I heard that he's starting on a 3rd book. Really excited. Don't want to push him because I know you gotta, take it slow, take it easy. But yeah, go ahead.
The funny thing is, I have a very good friend of mine. Her name's Chantal Boudreau, and she's literally the sort of author who can sit down every day, come home from working at her day job, sit down and hammer out 1,000 words after supper, and spend some time with the husband, and spend some time with her kids, and somehow makes that work. And to me, I'm in awe of people like that because I can't do that. For me, writing is a thing that just sort of suddenly I've got to sit down and I've got to spend an hour just getting this scene out of my head out on the paper. So I just haven't actually I'm actually working on 2 different books right now. And I've got a 3rd one sitting in the back of my head, but I'm kind of stuck. I can't get further forward on any of them. And it's kind of frustrating for me because I think when they finally get them done, they'll be fantastic stories. It's just, nothing's coming out the fingers right now.
Yeah.
But of course, the book series you're talking about, Suzanne, of course, is the Solder Diaries. So I'm working on the 3rd book, which is Between Two Thorns. And then I've got another one, which is completely different setting, called Somerville, which is a story about a crew of a submarine who live in a world where, for whatever reason, the cities are all under the ocean, hence the title Somerville, which is French for undersea city. And so they're part of a salvage ship that cruises what's called the Old World, looking for stuff that they can recover to use for their new undersea city. And of course, there's a story that develops as we discover what's happened. And the third one is I'm toying with and would dearly love to get done. It's called Africa by Airship. And it's actually a story where the female character, so the protagonist, the main character, the protagonist, is a 70-something retired matriarch who decides that for the first time in her life she's going on an adventure.
I like steampunk, but what I notice is that there's so little of it. It's such a niche. You see very few steampunk games or movies or anything. There's a couple of good ones maybe, but it's a very small genre still.
It's funny. The big part that you will find of steampunk is actually, I hate to put it this way, it's one band. There are a lot of people who are terribly enthusiastic, and there are some excellent steampunk writers. Most of them, interestingly enough, are women. Feminism is a very important part of steampunk. And so the best steampunk writers are all women writing strong female characters, which is fantastic stuff as far as I'm concerned. But what you find is, if you want to, steampunk music is basically three bands. You could argue Clockwork Dolls, Vernian Process, and Abney Park. I'm sure there are going to be people who complain and shake their fist and say, "Oh, there's more than that." But for me, when I think steampunk music, that's the start and the end of the list, pretty much. But you're right, steampunk is very niche, mostly because, there's one fellow here in Canada. His name's Mike Percheron. He wrote his PhD in literature on what is steampunk, and what he concluded was that it was an aesthetic. It's not literature. It's not a music. It's not all of the. You can't. It's a look that you stick onto something else, and so there's a standing joke that. Runs, just put some gear, paint it brown and put gears on it. And that's, so how do you tell a steampunk story? Well, you take any other story, you paint all the colors brown and you put gears on it. And that's trite. It's a little unfair, but it's not wrong either, is the problem. And so I think part of the thing too is that you're not seeing a lot of steampunk movies or the like, because it's very, very hard to explain what steampunk is.
Yeah.
And I hate to be like, again, I know I'm going to get some fist shaking about this, but ultimately, feminism isn't a popular topic in Hollywood.
True.
And feminism is a absolutely strong, from my perspective anyway, a strong part of steampunk. The most popular steampunk stuff, female lead characters doing very powerful, empowered things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's interesting from that perspective, and I know that it is very popular in Eastern Europe. I keep track of one of the bands that I follow, and they're forever getting booked to fly from the West Coast of America over to do a tour of various clubs and stuff throughout Eastern Europe. And yet they're saying they're having trouble getting gigs in the East Coast of America. So. Yeah, it seems to be very culturally centric. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I noticed in your first book that there were many very strong female characters, and the lead character, the gentleman, was totally a gentleman. I mean, he was a gentleman to a fault. I kept thinking this guy's going to mess up at some point, but no, he did not.
It was interesting to write that character. One of the things that a lot of people don't know is all of the people. One of the things they tell you when you start writing is never, ever, ever write a book about real people. And to me, that seems silly. Yeah. Real people are the most fascinating. So everyone in that book is somebody I've met over the journey of my life so far. Mm-hmm. The nurse Colleen was actually a doctor I served with in the Navy. She was a female doctor posted to a ship with 250 guys on board. And she earned the name Mama Doc within the first 2 weeks because of her just amazingly charming ability to just, so she was mom, and the guys got incredibly pissy about anybody who said the least thing afoul of her. All of the characters in the story to a point are somebody I've met along the way. Mm-hmm. So that's what I find interesting about the stories, about the characters of Solder Diaries, was that what was interesting is good science fiction is about what happens when you put a real person into an unreal circumstance.
Yeah.
And how does that person sort out what happens in this different way of looking at the world? Yeah.
Yeah, and I was thinking now, Floris, your game looks to me like it gives people the opportunity to do exactly that, to take a real person, say me or you or Michelle, and put us into a fantasy character. Will you maybe take it from there?
Yes, well, what you can do is take your own photo and just make up your own. It's kind of like role playing, I guess. Like role playing games, you make up a fantasy name for yourself and a class and a type, whatever you want to be, a mage or a warrior or what you like, and I can visualize it for you with your photo on somebody else's body, basically, and with some nice armor or clothing. It's for me. It's just a way to fund my campaign a little bit more, but also to give more input to people that would like this game, and I think a lot of people would like to have their own character if they don't have to pay too much for it. So that's just a way for me to spice it up, but I also like the concept of crowdfunding, of having mutual ownership to something. So that it's not just me that's just creating, but other people too. You know, I like it if they come up with cool ideas for my game.
And explain to me, talking gamer to gamer, what the first 10 minutes of playing your game is going to be. What's the loop?
You can flip over the cards, but you can only flip over a maximum of 3 cards.
Okay.
A little bit like memory, but with different rules, and all these cards can do something for you. They all have basic statistics, magic, power, defense values, and it's all about quests. Every time you get a quest that says, okay, I need 20 magic, I need 10 defense, I need 5 power, something like that. And then you need to try to fulfill that quest with 3 out of 3 out of 12 characters. And there's also another thing, the characteristic. A quest will say, I need somebody with influence or somebody with charisma,
and so that's where the memory aspect of it is trying to remember which 3 cards you should have face up when you start the quest.
Yeah, you try to remember where are my guys, basically, or of course there's a lot of female characters actually, but but the funny thing about the artwork is about 2/3 characters is female. When you start looking for artwork, you will find that a lot of artists, not just the male ones, but even the female ones, seem to prefer to draw female characters. So actually I had a lot of female characters, but I thought I would get away with it with 1-to-2 ratio, sort of. In developing the game, the cool thing was to just look at a picture and then start to think of, okay, what could this character do? What would he or she be good at? Does this look as like a magician or or an aristocrat?
So as opposed to matching artwork to a set of stats, you said, what does this picture tell me, and wrote the stats for it.
Well, the stats, I had to make them up, of course. I had the basic rule that the total of these three stat, magic, defense, and power, will not be larger than 12.
Yeah.
Basic math rule, but beyond that, there's a name to be thought of and characteristics, and some of these characteristics. Sorry, I have some difficulty with that word.
That's okay. So do I.
Yeah.
Some of them are for bonuses, so to get more power or more on one of your other stats. But
Yeah.
some others, like I mentioned, diplomacy, are strictly necessary for quests. And one cool thing I came up with is for that some characters, they're the opposite of diplomatic. They're undiplomatic. And so if you would
Nice.
have multiple characters flipped over and one has diplomacy, the other character can screw it up for you because that character is undiplomatic. So
I like that. Yep.
that beastly looking orc character with big, what you call it, mace. And you would not bring that character to a diplomatic meeting.
He's not going to all rot except to blow it up.
That sort of thing comes up every time I make a new card set. There's new ideas coming up for either for combos. I have cards that like to be flipped over first, so then they're stronger if you pick them first. Stuff like that, but also combinations. There's different factions in the game. One is called Darkling. Darkling faction, which is the most gloomy of the four. There's one called Renegade, which is more chaotic and a bit. I don't know. Have you played Magic, maybe, or?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
I've played. I was just going to say, my son used to be a big Pokemon fan, so I played a little bit of Pokemon with him, and of course he dragged me into playing Hearthstone. So.
Yeah. So Darkling is kind of the black color. Basically.
Okay. Yep. Understood.
Dark, and it's about death and gloomy stuff. Renegade's more like red, so it's like chaos, fire. There's Earthbound, which I gave a green color. It's more about connection with nature, more animals, stuff like that.
Yep.
And there's an Enlightened faction, which I would say is a combination of blue and white in Magic. So it's about order, about scholars, aristocrats, wealthy people, but yeah, angels, stuff like that. So those are 4 factions in the game. So that's just another simple way to add more flavor to the game. But
yeah, more depth.
I also have a random quest generator, and that also took me about 3 weeks to develop.
Yeah, those are hard.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to do a random quest generator. It's hard to do one that generates reasonable quests.
They have to be perfect. So it creates very challenging quests because it will calculate the possible bonuses you could get. So you'd have to play pretty well if you play those random quests. But it was a fun thing to do still. So
yeah. Okay. Well, I'm sold. I'll have to go take a look at
it in the game. And I was just making a background picture for the main menu of the game, and I had this picture of this character. She's called Celica, Messenger of Souls. Anyway, I just had this picture already and just had a 3D thing in Photoshop where I could add the cards. So I created the cards myself with the name on it. I thought it would be a nice way to tell a lot of things. Because first, the character looks kind of otherworldly. It does look very human. And it's also, I picked this character because of the color. She looks a little bit purple. And for somehow purple became the color of my game. The card backs are purple. So that was a very nice match. And I picked Mymero as a title. I don't know Mymero as a Mymero, but it's an anagram for memory, so that's simple.
Oh, that's clever.
This picture would tell a lot about, okay, this is a fancy game and it's a card game. And Mymero, you could guess that it's about memory. So that's a lot of information in one picture. So that's why I like it.
That's clever using an anagram like that. Like that. Points to you, sir.
Oh, thanks. Well, I also needed to. I had to think of a lot of names, and it can be easy. You can use these name generators online.
Yes.
You know them as a writer, but it's still the coolest if you think them. If you make up the names yourself, and it's always something I change. It's about feeling. It has to feel right.
Yes, agreed.
Also, one of the last things I did recently was to think of a name of this world where all these characters would live in, the fantasy world, because I still didn't have a name for it. And I just eventually decided for another anagram, which was called Orim. So the name of the world is Orim. It's just a very indifferent sequence. So it's easy, but it works for me. So
yeah, no, that's actually really smart. Actually, after a fashion, it allows to push forward a lot of information and still holds to the keep it simple, silly kind of.
Oh, I see Susan typing something associated with purple.
Mm-hmm.
The royal luxury. Well.
Yeah, those are just the first things I thought of when I thought of purple, royal things, unique things, luxury, dignity. And then I thought of Prince's Purple Rain. Who could not think of that,
Just if you grew up in the 80s, Purple Rain.
I didn't see the film, but okay, yeah, I know that.
And what's really unique about our conversation is that Michelle, I believe, is in Quebec, right?
Actually, I used to be. I've since moved to Prince Edward Island, which is sort of Canada's equivalent of Rhode Island.
Okay, and then I'm in Pensacola Beach, Florida, and Floris is in the Netherlands. So it's kind of neat to get everyone's insight, and I'm so happy to see how much you two have in common, with your interest in your career as well as your interest experience,
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
Yeah, when my husband saw that he might be able to be the face of a character in the game, he goes, I want to be the ugly guy.
We're getting some good-looking orc artwork,
Yeah, but he's...
The cool thing is you get to choose a lot about the wardrobe and weapons you want your character to carry.
Yeah.
I haven't so far. There hasn't been a person that asked for this, but I would really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that perk is like only $43 US, something like that. And I think when you do that, then you get your music, you get a T-shirt, and you get your face on the card, and I'm not sure what else. Can you explain that?
They're called low costs, you mean? As far as the game and the music are involved, I guess that those don't involve extra production costs for me. So there's only cost involved in the T-shirt if you want that, and the extra graphical work. And I have I know some very cheap freelancers. There's a site called Fiverr.com.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I found you.
Yeah.
If you look at the Kickstarter page, you will see my face on one of the characters. And that's what I'm pretty good at Photoshop, but not nearly that good. So I outsourced this. I paid $10 for this gig just to have my face on an existing picture, and then I was pretty happy with the result. So that's the extra cost of having your own character, basically. Of course, there's more work involved. I have to communicate and put some time in it, but I also calculated that in, and it's still pretty cheap. But if I would ask $100 for it, I don't know. Some people will say no, that's too much, and this is where I can keep it low threshold.
My personal metric is a night at the movies. In Canada right now, it's about $20 to go see a movie with pop with some soda and some popcorn, and that's about an hour's worth of entertainment. Mm-hmm. So hour and a half, your typical hour and 20 movie, right? So if you wind up one of the bigger ones in 3D, then you can start heading for $40 in a hurry. So for me, the question is always, okay, so when I'm looking at my perks list, is that worth a night at the movies? So far the answer is yes. I'll probably be signing up when we're done here.
All right. So we've got some new fans for the mobile app, Mymero, which is on Kickstarter, Mymero for iPad. And I know definitely we have some new fans for Michelle's steampunk fiction and his new ideas for his new books. Can't wait to see some of those. And you definitely filled in very well, Michelle, in keeping this conversation interesting. I don't think it would have been near as good with just me interviewing Floris. So I really do appreciate both of you. It was just really...
I've been accused of liking to talk too much.
Not a problem.
Well, I would like to read more about Michelle's books, but I have the link now.
Okay.
I don't know if there's any other things I could find on the internet. Maybe
what I didn't realize when I named the book, The Solder Diaries, was that apparently there's a European furniture company called Solder. And so I'm fighting with them on it for a spot on the Google homepage. It's not going well. But yeah, Amazon.com or Amazon, whichever Amazon locally that you've got. The book is called The Solder Diaries.
Yeah.
That's how it works these days. Google decides your name, not you. My first game name was called Memory Quest.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just looking for games on the iPad, and I typed in those words, Memory Quest. And there's no exact game with that name, but still, I would get so many results.
Yeah.
Different stuff, so I was afraid nobody would find it. So then I came up with the new name, Mymero.
Yeah, I wish I'd had that clarity of thought, but literally, when I sat down,
I needed somebody else to give me that tip. So it's...
Yeah. Yeah. What happened to me was literally I was on my commute when I was living in Montreal. They have a joke there. You get around Montreal by BMW. That's bus, metro, and walk. With the metro being the metro being the subway system. Yeah. So I was heading to go take the BMW, and I was literally walking up to the train station, and suddenly had this question. About 2 weeks earlier, my wife and I had been listening to a song by Abney Park. And at one point in time, I paused the song and looked over at it, and I said, that lyric is ridiculous. No one in their right mind would really do that. She said, so how would it work then? So we got into this argument, essentially a world-building discussion about how airship piracy would really reasonably be done. Lyric is something like, we're 3 miles high. I'm about to swing aboard. My tether's made of leather, so I'm not about to fall here. And I thought to myself, what kind of lunatic swings from one airship to another airship on a piece of leather rope? That's just asking for some guy with an axe to be waiting at the other side, right? So cut the leather thong and off you go. So we had this conversation about, okay, so how would two airships conduct piracy? So about 2 weeks later, I was walking to the train station. I suddenly had this question: who are the pirates? Okay, well, how does piracy actually work? Because piracy that doesn't have an economy is impossible. Stolen goods are valueless. Stolen goods you can sell is what makes you money. So if you have an airship, or any pirate ship, he's got to be able to sell the goodies somewhere. Pirates only buried their treasure as their retirement savings. Most of the money that pirates made went into running the ship and paying the crew and buying ammunition and buying food and all of these other things. And of course, you couldn't just sail into if you were raiding English shipping in the Caribbean, you couldn't sail into an English port and say, by the way, would you mind if we sold your goods back to you? They got really upset about that. So you had to sell places that by definition knew you were stuck. So the prices were horribly inflated all the time. So most of the time, pirates were in fact broke. That was the dirty secret about piracy. Most of the time, the pirates were broke, which was the reason they kept being pirates. They couldn't retire. The only one who ever got, there was only, I think, 4 or 5 of them who ever really got rich at it. So I said, so I had this sudden aggravating question. So who are the pirates? And who the hell are they selling all this stuff to? And that was actually the genesis for writing the book, was me needing to answer to myself. So I thought, okay, I need a character who knows nothing about the world so that I can get him to ask all the questions I have. So I just arbitrarily made up the name Hans Sauter.
There's pirates in my game too, by the way.
Oh, really? How does that work?
How does that work? Well, you can look at, if you look at the Kickstarter page, you will probably see a pirate in there.
Okay.
Actually, my own character looks a little bit like a pirate, but there's pirate characters, and I'm still working on my webpage where you will be able to see all the playing cards. But there's a couple of pirates in there. I had a lot of fun doing this, so thank you for the interview, and I enjoyed talking with Michelle as well.
Yeah.
So,